Blog Talk Radio.
All day, all night, all the time. BlakeRadio.com. Music for your mind, body, and soul.
2073, 2084, 2093, light years.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ted Terry Show on the Blake Radio Network, Rainbow Soul, Channel 5 at BlakeRadio.com. The Ted Terry Show emanates from Los Angeles, California. Now, this program is heard via the World Wide Web in over 143 countries. In an effort to understand racism and white supremacy, we continue our platform for understanding. My guest is Neely Fuller. Now, I want you to underline a recommended reading. Textbook for Victims of Racism and White Supremacy. I believe it was published back in 1964. Now, we're going to give you the number to order Mr. Fuller's book, Neely Fuller's book, a little later on. Neely Fuller, welcome to the Ted Terry Show.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. And Mr. Fuller, I recently interviewed Dr. Frances Cress Welsing on the subject of racism and white supremacy. It is my understanding that you played a key role in the good doctor's efforts in putting pieces of the puzzle together in her quest to understand the processes of racism and white supremacy. Can you tell us how your contribution was pivotal then, and where are we now in the pursuit for justice for victims of racism and white supremacy?
Well, for one thing, to start with, I equated the two.
You equated the two?
Yes, racism is white supremacy. White supremacy is racism.
Okay.
Now, these in following with the textbook for victims of racism, one of the things to focus on, or the things that I focused on, was the use of words.
Okay.
Because that's the cement that holds the system together, other than violence. The words are used to deceive the victims.
Words are used to deceive the victims?
Yes.
Okay.
When whoever thought up the idea of racism, white supremacy, had to, according to the evidence, think in terms of, now in order to make this system work, we'll have to use words, which means we will use the words to deceive people. And in order to deceive people, we'll have to use word tricks.
Okay.
And when the word tricks don't work, then we will back it up with direct violence. Because when you're deceiving people to their detriment, that is a form of indirect violence.
Okay.
So the key thing to do in dealing with the non-white people of the world, that is, whatever white people got together directly, indirectly, and thought up the idea of racism, they decided, apparently, that that would be the best way to go in the most efficient manner. It turned out to be the most powerful idea, political idea, for motivating people and getting people to do things at your bidding than any other idea ever conceived in the minds of people. It turned out to be the most powerful religion on earth, and that is the ideology of racism and or white supremacy, which, here again, they're both the same thing. Racism is white supremacy is racism. There's no other form of racism on the planet.
Now, Mr. Fuller, what we'd like to do on the Ted Terry Show is to give you a platform. In other words, I'm the student, you're the teacher, you have the microphone. We'd like for you to teach us about racism and the white supremacy. So if you would, give us a lesson on what we don't know.
Okay, well, I don't know what it is that people don't know, but I do know that the racists are the smartest people on the planet. The white people, whomever they happen to be, wherever they happen to be, even as we speak, are the smartest and the most powerful people on the planet. Now, what you do in order to come to these conclusions is not follow what Neely Fuller says. not follow what any particular person says. You follow the logic, because one thing that came with the entire universe is a thing called logic. The white supremacists, or the people who thought it up, used a logical process for doing so. That's why it has lasted so long and has become the monumental world problem that most people, including all of the scholars, all of the people in academia, say that they don't have the solution to. Almost everyone comes to the microphone saying, I can talk about it, but I haven't figured out exactly what to do about it. So it's a well put together package. It is, as someone recently said, not rocket science. It is harder than rocket science, but yet it is simplistic in basic formula.
Explain.
Meaning someone just decided that, looking around, presumably, this is based on logic. Someone had to look at the people on the planet and say, now, some of the people are dark and some of the people are light. And the lightest of the people who appear to be lightest, we will call them white people. Now, the dark people, we will call them non-white people. And let's think up an idea. Now, here's what we'll do. We will think up a system based on the royalist platform, meaning holier than thou. We will carry that forth. The royalist system is based on some people being better than others. That's the whole idea of royalty. That's why they say the royalty, the king can do no wrong. Mm-hmm. Kings and queens, they are the people who are the smartest, or the most divine, or the most everything that's supposed to be of the most constructive value. This is how people have come up with the idea of royalty. Okay. Now, where the idea of royalty came from, I don't know. Just like I don't know the idea of where racism came from, except the evidence shows that somebody put it in place. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. And apparently, they used the royalist format, meaning you will have a category of people who, because of their whiteness, would lord it over all of the people that they classify as non-white. And the first thing they get a handle on is they do the classifying. The people who are subordinate do not do the classifying, even though in this day and time, under the refinement of racism, they allow them to say what they are. But the bottom line, the supreme judges will be the people who believe in white supremacy. That's a political idea. Say, if you're white, you belong to the club. Now, you might be in a pecking order within the club, but you are in the club. Now, you can reject your membership at any time, but you do at great risk to all of your comforts. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty big incentive for the average white person to not opt out of the white club, mm-hmm. what you might call the white race or the white nation. Now, these are the people that run the planet. Those people who have chosen to be in the club. Those who have chosen not to be in the club are not powerful. They immediately lose their power.
So you're saying racism is a global system?
It's a global system, and it is the white nation, meaning the collective white supremacists, are the only real nation on the planet. See, what I call counter-racist codification calls for a whole nother perspective on how the world is run, and based on evidence. It just can't be based on theory. You have to be able to show some substance to what you're saying. That's why I say you follow the logic.
Now let's go back so we can give our audience a foundation. You didn't just start out yesterday studying racism and white supremacy. Take us back in time. I understand you were in the Korean War at that time when you was collaborating with Frances Cress Welsing. Is that true?
No, I didn't know her until
I
didn't know her until the late I didn't meet her until the late 1960s. I started
60s,
writing.
Yes, I mean but you were a veteran of the Korean War.
Yes.
Yes. And in 1960s you met her. Now let's go forward from there. But your research into the racism and white supremacy, how did you come about that, and some of the things that brought you up until today?
Well, people were talking about in the 1950s racial integration and racial segregation. I didn't understand the terms. And even today, the terms do not make sense because there's no way to integrate racism. And there's no way to segregate racism. If you're talking about racial segregation, I don't know who thought up the terms, but they are a poor choice of words. The words are very important because if you use the words for vehicles of communications, they don't communicate very much. What is an integrated black person? Say, if you're talking about racial integration, is a black person integrated when he or she is standing 3 feet away from a white person? Or is it 7 feet? Or is it 30 yards? Or is it 50 miles? Or is it 2 inches? I mean, what qualifies you to be an integrated black person? When are you integrated? How can you quantify it? See, everything is razor sharp in racism, which means you have to define everything that you say. And everything that you say has to make super sense, not just maybe sense. It has to be razor sharp because something as intricate and as exact and as functional as racism could not exist if it wasn't an exact science, which means the words have to apply. But the words that are thrown out by the white supremacists themselves are designed to confuse the victims. And these are the 2 terms that I first heard, and I was confused. Because I said, if you're talking about racial segregation, meaning black people and white people are not in contact with each other, I never knew a time when that wasn't so. Black people and white people have always been in contact with each other. Otherwise, how could you have a racial system based on slavery? You got to have contact. So what are we talking about here? So we're talking about basically a power relationship. Well, then we should use terms that explain that. So what we're talking about is white supremacy, not racial segregation, not racial integration. You're talking about an entire system of white supremacy. So you get that straight first. Get the word straight. That's what's in place. Okay. Now, that's what has always been in place since it was first put in place. And you call it that, the system of white supremacy worldwide. That's what you call it. And you get rid of whole tons of other words that are confusing. Racial integration, racial segregation are 2 words that you don't hardly hear people use anymore because they were always right from the beginning confusing. You have a system of white supremacy in place. What you want to do, or should want to do, is replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Now, the system of justice has never existed, as far as anybody knows in recorded history, because you give a definition to the word justice. There is no legal definition for the word justice. I have been informed. Maybe some legal scholars can say that there is. All the legal scholars that I have heard from have said that there isn't. So you give it a compensatory definition. That's when I start writing. That's why I call the work that I've put out the compensatory code, meaning making up for what's missing. What's missing is justice. More than anything else on earth among people is justice, but you have to have a definition that makes sense. So I came up with the initial term back in the 1950s of balance between people. But that doesn't explain anything in detail. Sounds catchy, but it's not in detail. See, it's all in the details. So I came up recently with, I'll say in the last 10 years, with a more elaborate and more detailed definition, and it's in 2 parts. Compensatory definition of justice is as follows: guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's part 1. Part 2, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most help. Now that's in all 9 areas of activity. Every minute of every day you have to guarantee this. It's never been done because you're talking about 9 areas of activity and it's in regard to everybody everywhere simultaneously. It's never been done. It's just a concept. And that's these areas of activity. I came up with the 9 areas, which I, in a compensatory fashion, made up. And I think they cover just about everything that everyone is doing at any given moment, any time on the planet. And that is economics. You're engaging in economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, all of these areas are interactive, meaning what you do in the area of religion affects what you do in the area of law. What you do in the area of law affects what you do in the area of politics. What you do in the area of politics affects what you do in the area of sex, or education, or economics, and on and on and on. These are just labels for what people do, because everything in the universe comes down to saying and doing. Now, when I started writing what I call the compensatory counter-racist code, I kept that in mind, that out of 10 million things to do in any given situation, every person on the planet should try to do the best possible thing that anybody can ever do in that same situation. I just threw out a number there, 10 million. I think that's broad enough.
You just threw them out.
Yes. Now, that's the doing part.
Okay.
Now, in the saying part, out of 10 million things to say in any given situation, on the job, anything else, a person should want to say the best possible thing that anybody can ever say of those 10 million things. And if a person just goes into every situation with that in mind, it gives that person focus, which is what the white supremacists never want their victims to have. This is why black people, even today, are some of the most confused, if not the most confused people on earth, because the system of racism is designed to keep them endlessly confused. They might be animated. They might be jumping up and down and going here and going there and doing this and doing that, but no focus, maximum confusion. That is tailor-made for people who are orchestrated or who have a code for getting and keeping power. You keep your victims, first of all, confused. Now, having said that, let me give an illustration. 10 people in a room. The person who is most focused and less confused out of the 10 people, that one person out of the 10 will have control over the other 9. That's the logic. That's what I mean by following the logic.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 9 people in a room who are confused about what they're there for, what they're supposed to be doing, why they are doing it, but there's one person that knows it all about why they are there, what they're supposed to be doing, what is going to happen as a result of their being there, how long they're going to be there.
Okay.
All right? That one person will dominate the other 9. That's just what you call kindergarten logic.
Okay.
And that's what codification is really about. That's a lengthy answer to that one question.
No, it's a good answer. I'm, as I said, I'm the student listening and taking all this in. Let me inform our audience. You're listening to the Ted Terry Show on the Blake Radio Network. We're having a wonderful conversation with Neely Fuller, and we're discussing racism, white supremacy, and I am enjoying this conversation because I think, and I hope I'm correct in saying this, Mr. Fuller, we need to put a face on the words. Is that true?
We need to put a face on the what?
On the words.
Yes. That's the key to it. That's initially when you do anything that calls for wording. Mm-hmm. In other words, like if you have a concept of what living is all about, what the universe is all about, you try to put it into words that will lead you to the truth.
Uh-huh.
So that means you have to pay attention to all of the words, because what the white supremacists do, or what any person who is anti-justice will do, is first of all try to stay away from what the truth of the matter is. as far as the victims are concerned. The victims will be dealing with falsehood. So the person who is going to be in charge and be opposed to the victims, in other words, try to keep the victims being victims, they are going to know what the truth is, but they are going to use the truth in such a way that they can convey falsehood to the victims, so that the victims will be what? Confused. See, the whole idea is to sow confusion, to have the people who are being victimized always, forever, non-focused, walking around bumping into each other and not knowing what to do about anything or what to even figure out about what's going on, and forever be asking the question, what's happening, and not having an answer.
I have to ask you this question, Mr. Fuller. You had made a statement, and I heard you say this over another interview. You said black people need to stay away from each other. Since you brought up black people in your last statement, why did you say that black people need to stay away from each other unless there's going to be some productivity?
Yes, black people should stay away from each other because as victims of racism, the racists have filled our minds full of poison. So whenever we come in contact with each other, the poison immediately begins to spread. Black people walk around full of poison. You can almost see it in our eyes. When we pass each other on the sidewalks, we're loaded with it. It's been put there. We weren't born with it. We didn't have that look in our eyes when we were little people, just little toddlers. We were wide open to the world, just like all people are when you're a toddler. But when you are in an evil system, a system that is designed deliberately to produce evil thoughts, to produce animosity, to produce violence, then that toddler, as he or she grows, begins to pick up the poison that's already here. And then the poison is spread as that person comes in contact, particularly with persons of like persuasion. This is why black people sitting on a bus, you can almost feel the atmosphere of hostility there. That's not a natural thing. That's artificial. And it's all put there by the white supremacists long before the bus was built, long before the people got on the bus. Every black person must realize this. So what do you do about it? Codification is all about what you do. You make sure that anything that you say to someone before you open your mouth is of constructive value. Anything that you do with someone, you sit down and plan it first and make sure that what you're planning is of constructive value. Otherwise, black people should go the other way when they see each other. They shouldn't even come in contact with each other. They should cross the street almost before they say anything to each other, because once they say anything, the poison starts, unless they already have something in mind to say that is of constructive value. Now, we just tried this. This is what you call the process of counter-racist codification. You're working against racism right there. But see, black people just cannot continue to do like they're doing, and that is wait until they make contact and then try to figure out what to say and what to do, and it comes out all messed up right from the jump, as we well know from experience. We should have learned that by now. So we should agree that we avoid each other. Avoid each other like we are carrying SARS.
That's what I was going to say, put in the terms of that we're carrying viruses.
Yes. Yes. There is such a virus as, social viruses that we send, messages that we send with eye contact, with everything. This is why you'll find a black person who will gun down someone with a 9mm in a line in a grocery store about nothing but a look. Mm-hmm. We're so full of poison, we're loaded with it. So if we back off from each other, avoid each other and say, now, I'm not going to say anything to this person that I see coming a block away unless it's something constructive. Otherwise, I'm going to avoid eye contact and every other kind of contact.
Well,
see, now, there is a governor on black people where that poison doesn't take place. And that is when that same black people, two black people coming down the street, they will start building up poison for each other a block away. But when they come in contact with white people, the poison is nullified because they know that white people can put a hurting on them. They know where power really is. Unless, of course, they happen to corner some white person off somewhere in an alley or something. But black people don't have that automatic poison rising to the surface because the poison hasn't been put there for them to have that kind of animosity toward white people. Now, that's not to say that it should be there, but the poison shouldn't be there at all. Black people should be like Mr. Rogers when it comes to interacting with each other.
Is this subconscious that we have this poison in us and that are not aware of it? And I know that the answer to the question, but I have to pose the question to you.
We're not only aware of it, we have come to glorify it. Black people wake up in the morning thinking about how we can spread poison among each other.
Consciously
and we call
or
it,
subconsciously?
It's conscious, because now it has become the black lifestyle. We call it the ghetto lifestyle. We call it the black community lifestyle. It is a major disaster of the planet. Major. This is why we slaughter each other all over the planet in huge numbers, just like it's nothing at all. It's nothing like the sound of the 9mm, one of Adolf Hitler's favorite cartridges. Hitler's been long dead, and he is reported to have not cared very much for black people. But one of the bullets that came out of World War II was a 9mm cartridge, and it is being used everywhere among black people and glorified as the principal instrument for spreading poison and making death among black people wherever they happen to be. The sound of the 9mm in the night. Pow, 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 pow. Glorified and enjoyed by many black people wherever they happen to be. It is a total universal disgrace. But we have that. So how do you avoid it? Avoid contact. A bunch of black people getting together, 10 of them, with no constructive agenda, always means something ugly. Always. No constructive agenda. Pre-planned in detail. The Million Man March worked because it was pre-planned.
So what
and
about
it was of constructive value, and
so
everyone understood that. See, it's not something that's in the people by nature. It's something that's carefully planted there. So you can plant, you can remove that, if no more than just temporarily, by having a plan. Say now, when everyone does this, when we all come together, the agenda is as follows. Everyone will deport themselves with decorum. There will be no throwing down of trash. And if you happen to throw some down or see some that's been thrown down, pick it up and put it in a receptacle. Now see, this is a pre-plan. Now black people work very well. This is why the churches, for the most part, work. When black people come to church, they have a code.
That's what I was going to ask you about the black church.
So black people, when black people at least come to church, they at least have an agreement in advance. So we're going to kind of act like for a few hours we have some sense. Unlike the way we acted before we came in here, even though when we leave here we're going to revert to type. But for 2 or 3 hours, we're going to go according to the little code that we have set up about the way you conduct yourself during these services. And so that's just a little respite.
What about religion?
Well, religion is nothing. Here again, you define what is a religion. It's a strong belief backed up by action.
Okay.
Now, the strongest religion on the planet is the religion of white supremacy. Now, a person might say, well, white supremacy is not a religion. Yes, it is. It's a strong belief backed up by action that has a God. Well, what is the God of a white supremacist? The God of a white supremacist is a white supremacist. They are their own gods. This is why they are very determined and very focused and very arrogant and very efficient. When they get ready to do anything, they have total confidence, and they do not take kindly to any images of a God that does not look exactly like them. They consider any other images as being inferior or non-existent.
Okay.
So it's everything that a white supremacist does reinforces white supremacy. They don't come around. They don't even come around black people unless they have that in mind.
Or unless they have to.
Everything.
Unless they have to.
Yes. And the only time they do, the only time they show up anywhere, it has something to do with the muscle of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're not going to show. Even when they come in the guise of doing other things, as people who are called Indians will testify. They'll say that they come, here again with the words, the forked tongue. And they're very efficient. But I don't want to spend all of the day just talking about what they do. A lot of people are familiar with that. And a lot of people may not be. But I also want to emphasize, what do you do? Like we have touched on some things.
Yes.
In every instance, meaning in every situation that you're in, there should be a prescribed way. That's the one thing that black people do not have, is a codified way of handling every situation. Not some, not guesswork, not shuffling and head scratching and wondering what to do or what to say, but precision work. That's the one thing that's missing. That's the one thing that has been missing ever since everybody started trying to deal with racism. The racists have a code for doing everything, and it is so deceptive, a lot of it, you can't even recognize it as a code. It's almost like magic. This is why in the book I say that the white people who believe in white supremacy are the most familiar mystery on earth. Now, what do I mean by familiar mystery? Meaning you're looking right at them every day, but you don't know how they do what they do, how they control everything, even when they are half drunk. How do they do this? It's because they have a code, and they don't violate the code. Otherwise, the whole thing would fall apart.
So run down the code again for us. Give us some parts of the code.
Well, now, the parts of the counter-racist code, meaning against racism, or the part of what they do?
Part of what they do.
Oh, well, the way they use their time and energy. Here again, I say that one thing, if a white person believes in racism, white supremacy, and many white people do, the most powerful ones, the smartest ones do, if they walk into a situation, the first thing they're thinking about doing is, now, for one thing, I'm a white person. I'm supposed to be in charge. I am supposed to be in charge. Drunk or sober, I am supposed to be in charge. Now, I may not start out that way. I may have to take low. I may have to walk around and just examine things. But at some point, I have to let these non-white people know that I'm the boss. I got to do that or die. No other scenario will work. I don't have a reason for living except to do that. So that's what they will do, and that's what they have done. And that's why they have been successful at it. Now, that might be under, if you put it under the 9 areas of activity, and you can just use the first one under economics. Economics is the use of time and energy. White men working on a golf course, playing golf, it looks like they're just playing golf. They are also discussing running the world if they are white men who believe in white supremacy. See, here again, I want to emphasize, you don't say that all white people are racist.
Mm-hmm.
That's a part of the counter-racist code. One thing, you can't prove it. You can't prove that even one white person is a racist if you are black. Anyone who has ever tried it has found this out. Now, what can the person do, or what has the person done? The black person who calls a white person a racist, in order to prove it, and anyone who tries it will find this out, you have to go and get a white person to prove it. You cannot prove it by getting another black person to back you up. That won't work. That goes to show you how awesome the system of white supremacy is. Everyone who is listening to this, if they have ever tried it, if they think about the details of the process that they went through, at some point, if you call a white person a racist anywhere on this planet, and you want to prove it, other than at gunpoint, you better go and get you a white person to back you up. Otherwise, you are out there on your lonesome and you're going under. Because the system of white supremacy, the white code, does not allow that to happen. If every black person could walk around and just put their fingers on the white people who they say are racist, and then everything just happened behind that with no white person backing it up, many millions of black people would do that. And the white supremacist system would be out of business in a few minutes. So that's why the white supremacists cannot allow that. Now, what are the white supremacists doing now? You say, according to the white code, they are doing 4 basic things: racial showcasing, racial population tailoring, racial dislocation, and white sacrificing. And these 4 things are designed to produce maximum sophisticated confusion among the victims, and so far has been somewhat successful worldwide. Now I'll start with the first one. What is racial showcasing? That means taking huge numbers of black people and putting them out front. There's going to be more of this.
For example?
All over the planet.
For example?
Well, I don't like to call names because then that gets into one of the violations of the counter-racist code, and that's name calling and causes conflict among black people.
Okay.
But I will say many millions of black people that you will see who will be rolling in money. They'll be able to showcase the places where they live. They'll be able to showcase their knowledge and expertise in various fields. And they will be on television. See, you have television now, you have all of the mediums for doing this, for showcasing huge numbers of black people. I will say it will eventually run into the millions, so many that you won't be able to count them.
All right.
Now, what is this for? This is for any black person that starts talking about racism in the future is going to be laughed at, because they're going to be able to showcase so many black people who are what you call quote-unquote successful, that it will seem that racism has been put out of business. But white supremacy is a world business, and like any other business, it works on profits and losses, which means percentages. You go into business, you expect a certain amount of loss. If you're in the grocery business, well, you might have a load of asparagus that is spoiled. But overall, you will make more profits than you have losses if you're going to stay in the business. Now, so the white supremacists know that the cost of doing the business of white supremacy is going up. They can no longer get away with Joe Louis and Lena Horne like they did years ago. Mm-hmm. They have to have many more black people who are going to be showcased. I made up this term just to explain it. You have to make up terms, because they won't make them up for you.
Okay.
So now that's the first phase, or one of the first elements in the maximum confusion. And so that black people won't be able to say, they'll say, well, you know, it must be something wrong with me that I'm down and out and don't have a biscuit to eat, because there are so many millions of black people who have so much, so it can't be race. But see, for the 4 or 5 million black people who will be showcased, there will be hundreds of millions worldwide who won't have a biscuit. Mm-hmm. That's the way the business operates in the future and will be. That's the way it seems to be going according to what? The evidence, according to the logic. The other is racial population tailoring. That's number 2.
Okay.
Meaning they're going to be killing huge numbers, either directly or indirectly, of non-white people. When I say black people, I mean, you know, non-white. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's in the non-white category, and doing this on an ongoing basis. Not to try to kill them all, because when you're in the business of racism, you don't kill off the thing that you need in order to keep racism going. Your ego trip which is what it's really all about. But you do tailor the population so you can keep them controlled. So you'll kill off a few million in the Congo, then a few years up the road, you'll kill off a few million in Nigeria, and a few years up the road, you'll kill off a few in Mexico, and on and on and on. And you will highly select the places where you do this. You'll have it all computerized, where you kill off huge numbers, or you have them, even better still, kill off each other, like you do in most of the cities in the northwestern part of the world, called the Northwestern Hemisphere.
Okay.
Having black people gun down each other, non-white people, the brown people gunning down each other, gangs and all that other foolishness, see? And you kill them off, and you just keep this going and you egg it on. And you put things in place that will see to it that it just keeps going that way. It never stops, because that's the mentality of the people. And this is racial population tailoring. In other places where the people are reasonably sane, they don't have a tendency to kill off each other, then you do things like dry up the water, or poison the rivers, dump toxic waste. It's all kinds of ways to do that racial population tailoring.
Okay.
All right. Then the other, number 3, is racial dislocation. Keep them moving. People who are forever on the move through eminent domain, urbanization, urban renewal, gentrification, or, here again, drying up the river.
Mm-hmm.
You build a dam 800 miles up, and the river seals off the water behind the dam. I mean, the dam is sealed off, the river is sealed off behind the dam. So that means that all the people down in the valley there, they don't get any water. They need water. They depend on the fishing industry. So now they have to come and work for you, because there's no more water there, no more fish. And you give them minimum wage and a promise for the future as long as they look up to you. So they'll know they're completely dependent. But keep them moving. If a black person in the Northwestern Hemisphere starts getting that second-generation house, then you come through and say you got to build a highway. That's the technique. Now, these are things that you asked about how the white supremacists operate.
Oh, yes. These
are the ways that they operate. A
You're
lot
on
of people
number 3.
are familiar with some of these operations.
You're on number 3.
Right.
So
okay, this is racial dislocation.
You said
now, the white sacrificing is the 4th.
Yes.
And this is, here again, all 4 of these things are for maximum sophisticated confusion among the victims. So you're not confused. You're keeping your victims confused. So you have white sacrifices, meaning it's kind of parallel to the racial showcasing. But these people in this case are white.
Sure.
Like in any army or any military operation, you're going to have some losses.
Yes.
So some white people are written off under the system of white supremacy. And a lot of white people are aware of this. They don't like it, but they are told that this is the cost of doing business. Just like a person who goes into the army and knows full well you might get killed, but it goes with the territory of trying to defend your bigger operation.
Mm-hmm.
So white sacrifices mean you'll have more and more white people on park benches, more and more white people begging on streets. They will be greatly visible. But what you won't pay attention to, because black people never pay much attention to what white people are doing, we just watch each other. See, they know that. You'll be passing millions of white people who are doing well on any city street. And for the handful of white people who have fallen through the cracks, you might say, sitting in front of the subways or begging in front of the delicatessen, for the handful that you see doing that, up under the bridge and all like that, it will give the illusion that it's not about race, that white supremacy is officially out of business. So there will be more of these white sacrifices, and they will be greatly visible. But compared to the number of white people who will be prospering, it will be very negligible worldwide. Now, those are the 4.
Okay.
Maximum sophisticated confusion elements.
We're talking with Neely Fuller. We're talking about racism and white supremacy on the Ted Terry Show from the Blake Radio Network, Rainbow Soul, Channel 5. Mr. Neely Fuller, white supremacy and sex, can you speak on that issue?
Yes. Sex is the 8th area of activity, the second most powerful motivating force among people when they are reasonably fed, even when they are half-fed on the planet. The first most powerful motivating force is the system of white supremacy itself. Mm-hmm. The next is sex. People are thinking about sex, directly, indirectly, wherever they happen to be. You might say that in the animalistic kingdom, quote unquote, that's kind of basic. Birds and bees, they're thinking about reproducing or going through the acts that will bring about, theoretically or practically, reproduction of the species. So everything is geared toward that. Now, under the system of white supremacy, the white supremacists know they have to control the sexual activities of their victims. Mm-hmm. So, in order to control it, you confuse that too. This is why in the last 30 years in the northwestern hemisphere, and now spreading to other parts of the world, the white supremacists said, how can we keep them confused in that area and therefore make them easier to dominate? So what we'll do, like any great deceiver will do, they'll do quite a bit of it themselves. Like if you're trying to get someone to drink some whiskey, you got to drink a little bit yourself, even though you're not the person that's going to get drunk. You're trying to get the other person drunk. There are a lot of stories, that's about the Indians, where that took place. Sit down with the chief, offer some alcohol. You drink a little bit, then you get the chief to drink a whole lot. Chief winds up drunk while you're still sober, even though both of you are drinking. Mm-hmm. So the white supremacists in the area of sex uses the same technique. They will come around and they will say, well, one sex or two sexes won't do. In other words, male and female. Let's scramble them. Let's have the males pair off with the males. After all, it's all fun and games. Who cares? It doesn't do any real damage. We're all human beings, quote unquote. And they'll just, use words, to get everybody all geared up. Then they'll have the females laying around with the females, the males laying around with the males. They might even throw in a few animals, for good measure. But the whole idea is to foment as much confusion as possible. And they participate. See, just like on the whiskey thing, they participate up to a point. But they know what they're doing. They have an agenda. The people who are being victimized, they're just doing stuff like all victims do. See, victims just do stuff. They don't have any reason for doing it. They just see everybody else doing it, and they plunge right ahead. Then at some point, the white supremacists begin to ease out the side door, just like the fellow who sat down with the chief. He begins to lighten up, you might say, on his intake of the alcohol. And they begin to back away and pull away. And then they stand back and look outside from the windows and look at the chaos that they have produced at this party that they put into operation. So here again, you have the confusion element. See, all you need to do is set off enough confusion. You got control. Set off confusion among the people who are following your ideas. Mm-hmm. They think that they did it. In fact, if they do enough of it, they think they invented it, like black people are prone to do. Black people go around, call everybody MFs and all like that. See, they think they invented that. Black people think that they invented drive-by shooting. Well, what were they shooting before there was an automobile? What was the drive-by? I guess they had drive-by canoes. I don't know. But that's the scenario. And in the sexual area, that is one of the monumental confusions. The other thing is just any kind of confusion that you could set up between black males and black females. And that all kinds of hostility.
And that's where I was going to go next,
yes.
Mr. Fuller, is the black
right.
female as it relates to the black male.
Mm-hmm.
Those interactions.
Sure.
Can you speak on that? Because that is so important as it relates to the role of the black male and the role of the black female and how this issue, it's a very important issue that I need for you to try to speak on for us, if you would, please, sir.
Here again, you follow the logic. Like I say, don't follow Neely Fuller, don't follow any person, because people make mistakes, including Neely Fuller.
Okay.
What you do is follow the logic. Now, what does the logic teach us? What does the evidence show? That black males and black females can hook up real easy, and they do, in great numbers. Mm-hmm. But as soon as they hook up, the poison spreads. Now, what is the chief element in the poison? Almost in every case, no matter how many tons of books that are written on the subject, it seems like almost everyone is missing the most important thing that is somewhat obvious if you follow the logic. That is, the person, one or both persons, in a so-called relationship between black male, black female, one or both persons usually winds up saying somewhere along the line, usually very early, I didn't know. Those 3 words. Now, if you follow the logic, if that's the case, if that's the first thing that the person says when they really are dissatisfied, I didn't know, something that they didn't know, that comes to the surface, why didn't they know? They didn't know because not enough questions were asked and answered before they made it to the bedroom and engaged in sexual intercourse for the first time. That's where all the problems come from. Rather than the 15 or 20 questions that are usually asked, maximum, over a period sometimes of months. Lots of talk, but very few questions, very few answers. The questions usually go, where do you work? What's your name? Are you married? How much money do you make?
Do you have any kids?
Yeah, do you have any children?
Right.
What kind of car do you drive? So it comes to a maximum, even if spread out over a few months before they make it to the bedroom. It comes to a maximum of maybe about 20 questions. I'm just giving a figure.
Right.
Maybe, give or take, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30. But that's still not enough questions. There should be a minimum of 200 questions. And some of them pretty rough. Some of them pretty average. Like, what's your name? How many children do you have? Is your mother living? But most of the questions should be questions that are very, very intrusive, and both persons should ask and answer every last one of those questions before they come anywhere near a bedroom. Is there anybody looking for you? Are you on parole? Are you on drugs? Have you ever had any kind of disease? Have you ever had sexual intercourse with a white person? How many times? When? Where? Under what circumstances? And give details. All the details. A person should know that. Anybody that you're lying in bed with, getting ready to have sexual intercourse, there should be nothing, absolutely nothing, that you don't know about that person. That should be a part of the new counter-racist code for black people. And that will dispel a whole lot of poison and misunderstanding that culminates in people saying, I didn't know you were like that. I didn't know you would get angry about that. I didn't know something like that would make you mad. I didn't know that you like to spend money like that. See, these questions should have been asked and answered long before.
Does this filter over into friendships as well?
Well, that's what it should start out. That is what friendship would come from.
Right.
See, in other words, a healthy relationship should evolve out of what you call friendship. A logical friendship. Otherwise, it's not going to sustain itself anyway because it's built on lack of knowledge and fantasy. See, black people like to fantasize. That's why we like nightclubs where everything is artificial, where the lights on the wall are artificial, where nothing looks the way that it really is. That way, everybody can have a comfortable time lying to themselves and each other. But there is such a thing as daylight.
But Mr. Fuller, you said a key word. You keep saying that word, and it's logic. The word I keep hearing you say is logic.
Follow the logic. Those are 3 words. Follow the logic. Always. Don't follow people. People make too many mistakes. In the universe, there's a thing called logic. Logic meaning the best possible thing to do, the best possible thing to say in every instance. That comes down to the food that you eat, and I'm not very good at that. I don't know anybody who is, because the food is poison too.
Yes.
But you try to do the most logical thing in every situation. That's the only way to find yourself out of this, because what the racists do is try to get their victims to do everything that's illogical, and we conform to it very well. We have no rhyme, no reason hardly for anything that we are doing, and if you catch us doing anything at any given time and you ask a logical question, why are you doing it, we will usually give some vague answer, well, it's just something to do. And the racists love it. Say, oh, yes, as long as we have you in that frame of mind, we got you. But you haven't even thought about what you're doing or why you're doing it.
Right. We're talking with Neely Fuller on the Ted Terry Show. Your book. Let's talk about your book for a moment. How can they get a copy of textbook for victims of racism and white supremacy?
Well, they only carry it in a few black bookstores, those who have agreed to carry it in the large cities. Let's see, on the West Coast, you got Marcus bookstores up in Northern California, Fillmore Street in San Francisco. In Los Angeles, you have Esalen bookstore.
Yeah, Esalen.
Right, they carry it, have carried it for years.
Right.
And in other places, just shop around and ask about the black bookstores, and you will most likely either find it or they can get it. Now, otherwise, you can get it directly from me.
Okay.
That's at 202-484-5461.
Okay. That's 202-484-5461.
Yes.
And they can order textbook for victims of racism and white supremacy from...
Right. Well, it's only one book that I carry. I mean, I'm not in the book business.
I know. Just one book, yeah.
Right. So,
right.
If they just contact me, that's the book that they'll be talking about.
Right, absolutely.
And it's called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, but that is the basic title. The subtitle is Textbook Workbook for Thought, Speech, and/or Action for Victims of Racism / White Supremacy.
Okay.
Here again, I keep emphasizing, racism and white supremacy are synonymous. They're not separate. You never separate those two terms.
/
Right. In other words, racism is white supremacy. There's no point in being a member of a race, by the way. Black people are not members of a race, never have been. We were told this. That's not true. We never joined a race. We were told that we were members of a race. By whom? The usual suspects. The white supremacists. They do the categorizing, and right now they're categorizing people all kinds of ways. You even hear terms like brown power. Most black people throughout the entire planet are brown. They are dark brown, even in Central Africa. If you look at them and see what you're looking at in the Congo, and one way to test it is look at the hair of the black person. Look at the hair if the black person is reasonably young, not gray hair. Look at the black person's hair, the black person that you call black, or Congolese. Then look at the person's forehead, and you will see there's a contrast. There are very few truly black people left on the planet. No thanks to the white supremacists. Now, why is this important? It's because you have people walking around now, particularly on the West Coast when they're demonstrating, and they say brown power, correct?
Right.
Now, what kind of sense does that make when most black people are brown? See, black people are black, brown, red, yellow, beige, tan, but they are all shades of black. But the white supremacists are scrambling around now, almost confusing themselves, which is what a master confuser is not supposed to do, by all the racial classifications that they're trying to come up with at the last minute. Because they're getting themselves in hot water. The cost of business of white supremacy is going up. So one thing that they have to have straight is what the classifications are. When they started out, they had white, black, and mulatto. Now, when you look at the list of names and classifications of race, you have things like Pacific Islander.
Yes.
What color is a Pacific Islander? I think Marlon Brando is out there somewhere.
Somewhere out there.
Yeah. Now, is that a race? A Pacific Islander, a person who happens to be, in a canoe on a Pacific island? That person becomes a race of people, a classification. It doesn't make sense. The races know that it doesn't make sense, but they will put it out here for the victims. And the victims, like always, we just pick up classifications and run with them to the wrong goalposts without even knowing what the game is about.
Let me say, I want to go back a little bit, Mr. Fuller, to what you said about black people having a virus in them, not from birth, but it's a learned type of sickness, as you call it, a sickness, was it, towards each other?
Sure. We all have it. We have to assume that we have it.
So
when we assume that we don't have it, when we walk around talking about how much we love each other, that's the worst thing in the world that black people can do. We wait until maybe February and start talking about Black History Month, and we immediately start having meetings and talking about all this grand love that black people have for each other, and we're lying to ourselves, which is the worst type of lie, and we're lying to each other. And that is another spread of the poison. We should admit that we can't stand ourselves or each other. And the first people we admit it to is ourselves, and we'll tell it to the whole world, because that's the truth. But it was planted there.
And you say we need to stay away from each other.
And we add that too.
Wait, pardon?
We will add that it was planted there, and then we will act logically accordingly by saying, now we know that we carry this poison, that we carry all this virus.
Okay.
All right, all of this self-hate. So knowing that and not running around trying to pump ourselves up on something that's false, talking about how much we love each other, because that will erupt. See, a lie will not live. So you can't start with that lie. You can say that we should love, but don't ever say that we do it already. We don't come anywhere close to it. You can't have love without justice anyway. Nowhere on the planet does that actually exist. This is why a person will stand in front of a judge and say, I killed her because I loved her. See, we call love everything, by every kind of nonsense label you can name. And we fill it full of our books and everything, talking about all this grand love, and this grinning from ear to ear talking about love. It doesn't exist, can't exist in a system of injustice. So the first thing you do is work on producing justice, meaning I don't really like you because I don't like myself, but I'm going to do everything I can to minimize conflict between me and you. That's what you do about it. That's what you do on a job and everywhere else. You can start off by letting people know, I don't really like anybody in here. Not to talk about love. Can't stand you, can't stand myself half the time. Right? Just tell it like that. Say, now, that being the case, how are we going to get along? Well, we're going to get along by not trying to bump into each other and step on each other's feet, and keep our distance from each other until we have something constructive to say or do, and we'll get along just fine in this office. It'll work wonders. It's a breath of fresh air.
So, Mr. Fuller, before I let you go, I need to find an answer to how can we stop the violence in our communities. I know you've laid the groundwork for that, but I need for you to speak on that. What can we do? We're killing, and we talked about this earlier in the program, but what can we do?
That's how we do it. See, it sounds so simplistic, but this is the mechanics. This is the logical mechanics. Black people usually get violent with each other when they come in contact with each other. There's no other way to be violent.
Right.
So if we minimize that contact, we will minimize the conflict. I often say in my talks and whatnot, and in explaining to people how that works, have you ever noticed how you get along with someone that you haven't seen in a long time? Right. Black people who haven't seen each other in a long time, in 12 years, you spot somebody, on a city street. You haven't seen them, didn't know where they were, had completely forgotten them. then you can cross that street and throw your arms around them and shake hands, and you all can get along fine for the first 15 minutes. All right? But the person next door you fell out with 15 years ago, and you haven't spoken since, and glaring at each other every time you pass each other on the sidewalk. That's because of the proximity. So you're too close. That's the problem. See, a lot of black people's customs that used to work, they don't work anymore, sitting up in each other's houses, making small talk. Avoid that.
Gossip.
Yes. See, because that's what it's going to lead to, because the poison is there. If you visit someone in their house and all like that, you visit only to do something constructive or say something constructive. And the minute the constructive activity is over, you depart without so much as noticing a picture on the wall. Because if you do that, then you're going to start picking at people. We know it. We ought to stop doing it. Stay out of each other's places of residence. See, I'm talking about avoiding violence. This is how it gets started. See, if black people just make up their minds, I'm only going to talk to you if I have something constructive to say. If I have to go somewhere and sit quietly and think of something constructive to say, so be it. Then I can come and talk to you. I'm not talking about breaking contact. I'm just saying every contact should be of constructive value.
One other thing before I let you go.
Okay.
Yeah, years ago during slavery, there was a code that was used when the master was coming, and they used this particular code in church with the ushers.
Sure.
Yes, and I heard you say that one day, and it made so much sense to me. How the ushers fold their fists behind their back. Can you explain that to our audience, how that is, so they'll understand it? When I heard you say it, I was like, oh, that is...
Did I say that?
I think you did, when the master would come, during slavery time, when the master would come into a group setting of black people, they would put their hands behind their backs and fold their fist and close their fist. And that would be a sign that the master was coming. Oh,
you may have gotten that from someone else. Because I hadn't heard that one myself.
Well, maybe I did. And
right. But see, black people have always had certain codes, but the codes have never been collated, and they have never been in intricate detail.
Okay.
See, the code is kind of raggedy. See, and all we have now, I mean, it comes anywhere close to what you might call a black code is what we call a black lifestyle, and it manifests itself in nothing but a bunch of cheap slangs.
Oh.
Right. All black people really have that we call the black lifestyle, really, if you look at it, is nothing but cheap slangs. When I say cheap slangs, I mean they're not of very much value. They're not of any constructive value. But back when things were a little uptight, we had a more sophisticated code, but even then, it's always been shabby. This is why we have never gotten out of the situation that we're in. The average white person becomes aware of the white code about the time they're around, I'll say 13 or 14, and they really have a grip on it by the time they're around 22 or something like that. They really know what the white code is. They pick it up by osmosis. They don't sit down and discuss it and all like that, but they just pick it up just by observing.
One more thing here. What about blacks and Jews?
Blacks and Jews, that's a term that does not make sense under any circumstance and never should be used.
Never should be used.
For a very logical reason.
All right.
Look at the words.
Blacks and Jews.
Yes, put it on a wall somewhere, and just those three words. I have done it on many occasions, and then ask someone to try to have a conversation based on those three words in combination. Now you can put Muslims and Jews, Christians and Jews, Muslims and Christians, Buddhists and Hindus, Hindus and Muslims, but blacks and Jews, what kind of conversation that anyone ever could have that would make any logical sense at all under that heading, even though you will see those words in combination in many places? I think that those are three words made in combination that the white supremacists thought of and put out there and then held their breath, wondering if anyone had noticed There is no way to have an intelligent conversation using those three words in combination. It is totally impossible. And I have been to seminars where people have attempted to talk about that subject using those three words, and I have come away learning absolutely nothing. And I say it's impossible to learn anything that makes sense starting off with that heading. And it's obvious in the three words themselves. Black is what? There's no religion called black. And what is a Jew? See, these are the words, these are the things that you ask. You start by asking questions. What is a black person? And then what is a Jew? Now, black, I understand, you're talking about a color. Now, what color is a Jew? Black. Now, I heard someone say that, well, a Jew is yellow. Well, wait a minute. Yellow is a shade of black. It's impossible, totally impossible, for any two people, any 10 scholars, any 10,000 scholars. Now, I'm just making a flat statement that maybe can be proven false, but it hasn't been yet as far as I know, because no one has been able to explain to me, first of all, how you can use those three words in combination, in any combination, blacks and Jews or Jews and blacks, and make any kind of sense at all. Because the first thing you do is ask for definitions. Okay. What is black and what is Jew?
Again, your book is?
A-N-D is a conjunction that puts the two words together.
Right, it's a conjunction. Again, your book is titled, Mr. Fuller?
The title is The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, but I usually use the subtitle, A Textbook Workbook for Thought, Speech, and/or Action for Victims of White Supremacy.
Okay. And the telephone number is area code 202-484-5461. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, and they can get information on how to get the book.
And also check out the African American bookstores.
Yes, that would be the recommended way. Check out first. Right.
Right. Well, Neely Fuller, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the Ted Terry Show, and hopefully we can do this again. We haven't met, and maybe that's a good thing that we haven't. But
well, someone once said that if you like the book, never meet the author, because you definitely won't like both.
Okay. Right. Once again, thank you. And I want to speak more on the correct usage, using words correctly. That was so important, profound statement that you made, and I want to revisit that again.
Oh, sure.
So if you would give us another opportunity to interview you at a later date.
At any time that I'm invited to do so.
I thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
And thank you.
Okay. This is Ted Terry. Thank you very much for joining us on the Ted Terry Show. My guest has been Neely Fuller. And hopefully you will call him and order his book, visit some of the African-American bookstores, and I'm sure that it will be interesting reading for you. Once again, thank you for joining us on the Blake Radio Network. Blessings to the family.